Hmm.
You need to know dreaming life in. Yes, all right. Okay.
Okay, how's everybody? And want to say hello to everybody. And we're going to do poems and speech live, and
Yes.
we're going also live on Facebook. And today we're going to talk with Tom and Roberta. We'll talk about. I'm going to go to my slide here. Okay, and here, Tom is going to, is a two-time stroke survivor, and Roberta is going to talk about his, introduce him before we go.
Okay, thank you, Mark, and welcome everyone. We're in for a really great conversation this evening. Dr. Tom Broussard is poetry in motion. It's a type of motion that's familiar to those of you who are already thinking about trying your hand at writing poetry or are already writing poetry to tell your stories. It is the motion that comes from creating opportunities out of challenges. In conversation with Tom this evening, this motion is reflected in the path he created as his role as an educator, aphasia advocate, and author. He's published 5 books so far. That's why he's poetry in motion. And the first 3 deal with his personal journey with aphasia. The scope of his next 2 books expand to include the nature of aphasia, brain function, and recovery. His work as an author and a public speaker reflects a balance of looking within for internal resources and looking outward to external resources to develop a plan for achieving his goals. If you've already met Tom, either in person or from his writings or presentations, you know that his journey has included graduating from the US Naval Academy, becoming a shipbuilder, and then becoming a business owner, and then moving on to helping others develop skills. Later in life, he earned a research PhD at the Heller School of Social Policy at Brandeis University. And he was the Associate Dean in Career Services and Admissions at the time of his stroke in 2011. Welcome, Tom. We're looking forward to the conversation. I will be monitoring the chat in the chat here and on Facebook. If anyone has any questions or comments, we'll try to get to those at the end of the presentation. And I'll pass it over to you, Mark.
Okay.
Thank you, Roberta. Thanks for that very nice intro. Very nice.
Thank you. It's our pleasure to have you here.
Right. You're right. We're going to go right to back to here. Slide again. And well, Tom, I'm going to here on my this slide, it's having a map for your life is as powerful. And it said, like, I can't believe that at 4th grade, you wanted to be in the Navy, and in the Navy, and your father said that you needed to be good at math, science, English, language, volunteering, and it looks like that you really used that map that was there. Was that? Let me see if I could make sure that, see if I could get you tagged over here. There you go. And was it that easy, Tom?
What's that?
to,
Was it easy?
was it, yeah, it was that easy. Oh, all you have to do is use the map.
That's right. If only, if
Yes.
only you get born, you get your birth certificate and a map for this
And a
life
map.
ahead of you. Yeah, if
Yes.
only, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. For the most part, it sort of happens along the way, for sure. But it's a very nice PowerPoint and a nice slide that you have there with that map thing. So it's very interesting, I think, to all of us, given that what we all do and what Mark is doing is this is how we get better, right? I mean, this is how we get better. It's the activities themselves. Now we're talking about stroke here, of course, and aphasia, but before all that happened, we also did all the things that we, quote, normally do, whatever they might be, we just keep doing them. So an awful lot has to do with the activities themselves. And yes, we met it from our parents and coaches and other people. But again, going back to Mark here, because this is our new journey, you know, I don't want to say never mind my life before, it was highly helpful to get me to this point. But like Mark, he, in terms of his map, he is laying out this map ahead of him, and he now knows what we didn't know before, that all of these activities are not just fun, they are therapeutic. So that too is very important, because we could share our story and just sort of talk about it. I think what Mark does is he does it, and then letting others come, like me and others, to then help all of us understand that just these activities themselves are highly therapeutic. They were at the beginning of the stroke. They were a year ago, a month ago. They are therapeutic today by having this conversation. Absolutely. So I really do like your image of a journey, of a map. But again, I think it's important because we all have maps, and it's only after our stroke do we become aware that there is a map, it is in front of us. And if we do these things, meaning become realizing that these activities are therapeutic, then we can do more therapeutic activities, and we will get better tomorrow than we are today. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
And
we're,
yes, I actually did want to go to the Naval Academy when I was in 4th grade. I went to see my dad, and he literally said, sure, you can go. He says, but you got to be good at all these things. And I was a little kid, you know? So I said, okay, Dad, I can do that. I can do that. So yeah,
Wow.
that's how it all started. And Dad went back to reading his newspaper.
Like, I'll see you later.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Right. If you got work.
But you succeeded on your mission, and you know, you became a officer, and then you graduated, and then you went from the sea to close quarters.
Yeah.
You know, and then said, and this is what you had said. I know dark humor is better than no humor at all. So can you tell me, if you can tell me, let's go to the next one before we could talk about it again. You went to the destroyer, submarine, and then everything has to go in your mind. Where is the toilet paper? So can you, this is another quote, do you have any toilet paper? Bring me a couple of rolls. So that's how the way it goes. So
So you, with COVID starting, especially at the beginning. Remember when everybody was raiding all the stores, grabbing everything they could,
Yes.
especially toilet paper and paper towels. They were gone and they weren't coming
Right.
back. So everybody was very worried about getting toilet paper. So I wrote an article a couple of years ago about with COVID and described the quite similarities between COVID and being on a submarine about toilet paper and people. And it's pretty funny because when you are loaning a submarine to go to sea, you've seen on TV, maybe you've been to submarines before or gone to museums. It takes a lot to pack everything in a submarine that's going to go to sea for 3 months with no going to port. So everything you need has to be on that boat. It was my first time. I've been at sea on a destroyer for several years, but I just converted to supply corps school. So I had to join the submarine, go to sea with the submarine, and I had to meet the outcoming supply officer. So he explained to me how it's all going to work. And he explained to me that you have to pack everything in the boat, and then it's so packed that at the end will come an 18-wheeler truck, right? And it'll have nothing but toilet paper, huge amount toilet paper, and you can't put it anywhere. So he explained to me that you bring in the new crew. So every year you roll out one third of the crew. So you get a new group. There are about 100 people in a boat like mine. So about 30, 35 people were brand new sailors. They didn't know. The truck rolls in with all that toilet paper. And I had to tell them, as the supply officer told me, we're run out of space. There's no place where you can put them. This is just the new guys. Grab all the toilet paper you can and take it for yourself because we don't know where it's going to go. And all these little guys are like this, big eyes. They go, oh my God, we're going to sea for 3 months. We better get all the toilet paper we can. and you just lead them do it. Well, sure enough, a couple hours later, they just, carried them in as fast as they could. And they were stuffing them everywhere, under the top of the lights, under the lights, next to the torpedoes, in their beds, everywhere you could probably put it. And by the end of the day, of course, everything was now packed on the boat, right? Everything you needed. Well, the officers didn't go get it. They knew what was coming. It was this really a joke that happens every time with the new people coming. So the officers didn't go after toilet paper. We were just waiting for the joke. And it happens the next day when you go to sea, and everybody assembles with their own chiefs and officers and whoever your crew is for your group. And the same thing happened with me. I had about 8 cooks and 4 storekeepers, and they are, here we go, we're going to sea. And everybody, all the officers say, hey, chief, or not chief, but any number of people, and say, you have a couple of rolls of toilet paper? And the little guys go, what? Aren't they mine? And we said, no, they're not yours. Give me some. And that's what we say. That's when socialization comes into play. The socialization, just because they had to give up what they thought was, quote, theirs. That's how it works. And there was COVID, and there's a submarine, same kind of thing. You can have shortage, even on a submarine, toilet paper.
I thought it was funny on that article that you had. I thought it was a good one.
Yeah, it's on my website if you ever want to read it. It's pretty funny.
This is a bridging thought to action after 11 years, including 4 years at the academy. You left the Navy in 1980. duty was in Pennsylvania, and then you started doing some various construction and you came back to Maine as a engineer, and you're still wearing that. You still have a tie even when here at the show. You still have a tie on. It's very so. I think that was
you see the tie. It's a
Yeah.
Scrabble tie, right?
Yes.
On the letters. Exactly.
And then we went to also what happened was what you could tell us about Earth Day and composing your career project, and you need more tools, and we actually had your doctor there, and then we also worked in different places to right before your stroke. You worked help with people to get insurance, employment. So can you tell us about that? Let me go back, stop my show. Okay.
Sure. Again, it's on the one hand, it's helpful to share our stories. But sort of the next step of all this is to explore our own stories for the history we have had before our stroke, or even now after our stroke, but really starting to explore who we were before and how we became who we were. Obviously successful. You wouldn't be in this call if you weren't successful, motivated enough to learn more about stroke, aphasia, and your recovery. So it's sort of interesting because it's not to study my story or Mark's stories or your story and think that somehow you'll get better from that. It's more important to study your own history, your own transitions, your own ability to know who I was before, saw you had seen these transitions. How can I use what I used to use before my stroke to now transition? And in this day, when it's transitioning, you're really therapeutically doing these activities that will help you get better. So you have to now start to take what you knew before and use it now going forward to help you, quote, get better. So again, not that I go back to Mark again, but Mark, again, everybody does what we do. You also have to be conscious that what you are doing is therapeutic. So Mark is purposefully speaking words that are difficult to say, right? I remember when I had a hard time reading anything, and you have to go through all that in your head. Mark is reading now. He has built this company. He's built the poems. He's built the PowerPoints. He has some helpers along the way, but he is purposefully doing what he is doing to get better because it's therapeutic to use the effort that Mark is doing. I'm using Mark as a good example because the effort itself is therapeutic. It doesn't happen on its own, right? You have to be motivated. As the therapists always say, you have to be motivated and you have to practice. That's pretty much the way it works. So it is important to study who you were before, look for the habits that you had used before, and then use an understanding of what your transition used to be and build a new transition to whatever you want to do going forward. But assuming part of that is the therapeutic component that allows you to get better. So in my case, I was lucky because long before my stroke, like 20 years before my stroke, I had started doing an inventory of everything I had done in my life as best I could, looking for the transitions, the inflection points, the stories I got from my dad, and I wrote them all down, trying to figure out how I became who I was. If I really started as nothing more than a baby, how does that work? I wanted to know how humans make those decisions going forward. And I saved them up for a long time. And every time there was a transition, and as I got older, I got to see that I could see transitions in the future. So I ought to try and act on them, not unlike what Mark is doing here, taking action on them with a future yet unknown, except because I'd seen enough transitions before. Now I start to see some of those factors and acted on them. That's why I got a research PhD late in life. I was 54. Most people, when they see me, assume that I got it 20 years ago. And I said, oh no, that just happened. And for me, now after my stroke, realizing so much of my improvement now came as a result of what happened before, in terms of studying and understanding what transitioning might look like, giving the facts you have today and the supposed assumptions about what you might need in the future. So after my stroke, literally, I started doing all kinds of these activities, not yet knowing that they were therapeutic, but it was my habit to act on things as best I could. So that too became part of my improvement, and why I urge other people to consider, even if they are not yet aware through the passage of a therapist, not the patient might not be yet aware that what they're doing is therapeutic, but if they have their particular habits, they might have start to do them without yet knowing that as a result of just doing that. Writing badly, you'll get better when you're writing badly. It's the activity itself. So again, I think it's all very important to have these conversations, because every one of us have the back and forth to say, oh, what do you do? What did you do yesterday? And what are you going to do tomorrow? All meaning that there's always steps need to be taken step by step. So, but
Well,
thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I didn't get a
Mark, all the time,
Yeah.
Mark, for what you do all the time.
I had I didn't, when you are at work, you have to, keep to get better for what you do. There's nurses, doctors that have to take tests to make sure that they're you have to have classes to make sure that you're still be able to be a doctor. You have to have those tests and stuff.
Mhm.
So even in construction, people have to do that too.
Mhm.
So after my stroke, I wanted to get only one test that I tried to get was for OSHA. I was able to get my card again.
Mhm.
So, but anybody here that has to after your stroke, just you're back. You have to always work and work like you're working again. So
Yeah,
that's
working. I always say that the therapists always talk about motivation and practice, right? That's their 5 rules: is motivation, practice, 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 practice. Everybody in this room, although it's a virtual room, everybody in this room is motivated. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. And using Liz as another good example, Liz goes to lots and lots of groups, lots of conversations, which are therapeutic. Yes, she is waving. The Liz has done one book God knows how many more she'll make in the future. It is really the next step. And I know I'm going to come to Cindy too, but with Liz as an example, Mark as an example, is realizing again that, hey, you got into this room, right? You're motivated to be in this room. The next step, of course, is now doing what we do, acting what we do here in the room. Everything we do, by definition, you get better. The brain doesn't not learn every single moment of time, right? We're meeting for the first time in this particular group. So that means we're learning something. Tomorrow, we'll remember today, even if you just remember my tie. So that means there are new dendrites that have grown since today. Tomorrow, you'll remember. The next day, you will meet another person. You will talk about, why were we there? Why? Because we are doing this, finding out, maybe if that's the case, and for the first case, that we're getting better just by being social and having this conversation. Maybe some people don't realize just how important it is to be in a social group. Again, highly therapeutic. And now sometimes you have, you built things like your show, Liz's book, Cindy's cranes. You built things, physical things. They're not going to disappear, right? Tomorrow and the tomorrow after that, we get to see more of Liz's books, more of Cindy's cranes. And every time you quote, see that, you remember. And upon remembering, you are by definition therapeutic enough to then pull in other people into these conversations, because everybody will rise with that tide.
Yes, and I like her the cranes and other things that she makes. Really
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
All right.
And then, so then, now it was your stroke, and recovery was like an experiment. Is that? I want you to ask about that, and about word salad, and how I became who I am, and that's, and I think you were talking about that before. Let me see. So,
Well, the experiment. So in my particular case, and it's really just one person against millions and millions of other stories. In my particular case, I started my diary. Nobody told me to do that. The therapist never saw my diary. My wife never saw the diary. They knew I was doing something. What I didn't know was that while I was writing my diary, I was writing it with words that didn't make any sense to you or to me. But back then I was writing and thought, and I look at it every day. I would look at my entries and I thought, it looked fine. It would look fine. I didn't know that this was therapeutic, just to do the act, right, of writing every day. Turned out to be a 500-page diary. When's the last time you wrote a 500-page diary? But I was also writing with graphs, charts, and metaphorical images that do make a lot of sense. So you and I both would look at my stuff. Many of you have seen my first book, talks most about it. And you'll see what I was thinking, not with words, because they didn't make any sense, but with images that do make a lot of sense. But again, writing every day, it looked just fine to me. It was only at 11 months later when I became aware at that moment in time, and I mean literally at that moment in time, I was in a library writing in St. Augustine. I felt another click in my head, meaning I felt a conscious sense that something had changed. And I looked at my entry, my first entry again, like I always do. But this time I looked at it and I pointed, I said, oh my God, who wrote that? It's awful. 11 months. I didn't realize that awareness has its own deficits. So because unawareness was always there, becoming aware, and it was pulling in while awareness was leaving. Well, I wrote as fast as I could, and I actually said these words: I am telling the world as fast as I can. If I don't tell the world now, I will forget it in a minute. That my eyes have acclimated to a new altitude, seeing things I'd never seen before. And I wrote all that down because
Wow.
I knew, right? So back to the experiment though, because I was writing in the diary, I was recording myself with my phone, several hundred tapes, 202 tapes of that, hundreds of pictures of the world around me. But nobody saw that information until I had all this evidence, and then started to showing it to other people and started writing about it. If my therapist on the day after I wrote that first entry, again, if you look at it, because people sometimes think I'm a fake, that I just faded all this stuff. But you get to see my first entry, you get to see all these words, makes no sense. But if the therapist that day, the next day, if I said, oh, this therapist, here's my diary, tell me about that. And she had told me, oh, Tom, good for you to write it. It doesn't make any sense. That might have helped pierce this imagining that what I was writing for all that unawareness for months and months would have maybe sort of stopped the experiment earlier. Maybe that would have been helpful. Right. It's sort of interesting because I'm glad that nobody knew, because I saved this evidence and then became the evidence that I needed to explore later. But that's how I refer to that, my recovery and my stroke as an experiment.
Yeah, that's something. Yeah, I knew that I couldn't. It took me a couple of months before I realized that I wasn't really speaking very well. So, but that I couldn't be able to say like that though. But and here it is right here.
There it is.
Yes, there was actually a click, right?
Yeah, actually it was a click in my head.
Wow. So
Yeah.
Self awareness. So that's really hard to all of a sudden. It's like, wow, I'm not really saying things right, and that's when I stopped talking. It's like I was afraid of what I was going to say.
Yeah, it's true.
Right.
That's true.
And so this is still early from your stroke, and you actually you were in Florida, and you met somebody there, and you wrote your a poem, and so. Did you think that we were going to have a reading tonight?
Yeah, really.
Could
One
you say
poem
your
in my whole life. There it is.
Yeah.
Well, it's good. I would like to be. I would be great if it could be on our book.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. 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 That was the summer. So we were in Waltham, Massachusetts in September when it happened, and then we left in late May and got to Florida in the 1st of June, and I still couldn't read. I've been told I couldn't read, and I could tell I couldn't read because, again, I was taking pictures of signs out on the street while walking, and I could see stop signs and knew that it said stop, but longer words, they were too confusing. So I would take pictures, bring it to my wife and say, tell me, and say it out loud for me. And she would say them, and I go, I can understand that, what you're telling me, but I can't read it myself. So when we got to Florida, I had this little book by John Dewey, the most famous educator. And it's called Experience in Education. And it's only 91 pages and small little book. And although I now could try, but we were in Florida and we didn't know the area. My wife did driving and drive around, go to places. She would drop me off and I would just sit and read that one book. I still have it here. Obviously, you've seen a copy of it. So I would read it every day. And I knew I was having trouble. It was foggy, you know. It's an interesting way to not be able to read something that presents words right to your face. But the more I read them, and I would, what I call boxing them, so I could hold things, so I could only see one word, and then the next word, then the next word, and I could understand them, and really start to look for what obviously was a damage to the syntax and grammar that would become the neurological tissue that has to be bound together to allow a sentence become a sentence with meaning. So I read that book every day for the whole summer, like 3 months, as best I could every day. She would even drop me off at the bookstore where I couldn't read anything in there, but I had my little guy. And of course I could look at titles of books. I could understand titles because it's usually just one or two, but I couldn't read anything else. But I had this little guy and they had a nice little coffee shop. So she would go with her sister and drop me off and I would just drink coffee and cook goodies and read from this little guy. Well, a whole summer went through and by the end, I realized two things. One was I could read. For the first time, I figured, okay, I figured this out. All this repetition is highly important. I didn't yet know how I can now express how plasticity works today, but obviously I learned what was happening to me. That's number one. Number two was this guy, John Dewey, he's an educator, right? Well, he wrote this book, Experience in Education, and he wrote it as if he's a neuroscientist, as if he's a scientist. Wow. Because, you know, you and I and all the rest, we only learn from people we've met or books we've read. Now, of course, you could also call movies, right? But how did he know about the information you can get from even therapists or neurological people? How did he come by this information? So that was my next test, was to look for his history. How did he become this guy knowing neuro? So I went and studied his personal history, looking at his writings and his quote friends over his very, very long life. He was born in 1859. And he didn't die until 1952. I was alive. He died 6 months later. So I was alive at the same time as John Dewey. So he had almost 100 years. He was born before the Civil War. His father went to the Civil War. He was 6 years old when the war was happening. And his dad came home later when he was about 10 from the Civil War. He stayed down south and worked down there until he could come back up to Vermont. So I found out why he became the scientist that he is. And guess what? He became friends with a guy named William James, if you've ever heard of him. He wrote this book called The Principles of Psychology in 1890. And he is the guy who started using the word plasticity.
Really?
From the brain's perspective, not just because of plastic, because they had plastics even back then. But he's the guy who coined that word, learned a lot about how the brain works with his work, of course. And that is how Dewey figured this out, because when William James was publishing that book, he sent a copy to Dewey. He said, here, read this and give me feedback, give me a testimonial. And he had to read it, and it's 1,200 pages.
Wow.
That is John Dewey back then reading about it and beginning to understand this is how the brain works. So yes, you end up reading this little book, and I'm writing an article about him, and I'm calling him that John Dewey was a neuroscientist based on his experience and just learning what he learned from his, quote, new friend, William James,
Wow.
the guy
And,
who coined plasticity. And the fourth chapter of that book is called Habit, which is a large component of how I now explain how it works for us before our stroke, building the habits we need to be successful, and using that after stroke, using those same habits you had done before, because they can continue to be therapeutic, even if they're actions of which you're not yet aware that they're as therapeutic as they need to be.
Wow. And all from a poem.
All from that little book.
Yep.
And then I wrote that. I think because I was thinking about Dewey and I was thinking about myself.
It's great.
Thank you. So
Yeah, we out of time? We must be out of time, right?
No,
no,
no.
no, we're still good. You want to do your? Can you write your poem? Do you want to say it out loud?
What's that?
Can you say your poem out loud?
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yes.
I become, you become. Where do we become next? We become based on where we became. Yeah, if you look at some of my metaphorical images in the diary,
Right.
you get to see me writing, and basically this is the past if you look at it, but basically this is the past, and I was drawing this is the past, and then arrows, this is the future. And then now that's me today. Then I go back to the past. So I had these arrows back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, because each back and forth jumps every second, every minute, every day going forward. So I kept going back and forth as life progressed, right? And that is, I think, I'm sure that's why I wrote that, because that's the way it felt when I was learning something new, advancing today to tomorrow. Now tomorrow, looking back at what I learned from today, and now I have new knowledge to then go forward again for the new tomorrow of tomorrow. So that's what I was thinking at the time. I know this is probably blowing people's mind, thinking, boy, this guy's sort of crazy.
Yeah. No, it was good. It was yeah, you have to I don't know, you have to go back to your the things that you do, and the way you work, all the things that you it will help you to do the things that you used to do. So,
Yeah.
good. And then so here are your books. Here your diaries, and then I don't know if we can put that on the chat, that would be great. If we could have the books on there, or just the names on there.
Sure.
And then we also have the ABC of aphasia, and that there's all the words in there, and also the that's everything in the back of it. All those words are very it really helps you. And then when you metaphors really help, and I think that's people that if they want to write and use metaphors, I think that really would help people. I think that it helps me too.
Mhm.
And then part of some of the things that just a couple from in the book, adorning and adorning their neurological fabric. Yeah, it's I feel that that there's a hole there, and we're trying to get things taped up again. And so I think that,
Yep.
and then also here the your plasticity here. This is, it's like we're trying to, the more that we work, the more that we speak, every time we write, everything that will help us. It will help get better. And plasticity, it works, but it's very, very slow.
It's true.
And
Very
then
slow.
yes, and if you don't think that you're not going to be on that train, you'll never go anywhere. So you have to, we all can do it, and we can be there. And then these are the you have the for plasticity, use it or lose it, use it or improve it, and then all these things really help us here. So all these things are in the book. I really enjoyed what's going with that. When you have all these metaphors, I thought that didn't somebody tell you you're like the master of metaphors? Don't you have somebody? It was somebody said that in one of the books or something, I think.
We'll blame that on Liz. Liz thinks that. Yes.
Okay.
I get to watch Liz because I can see her smiling and laughing. So.
All right. So I would want everybody to, all these books are really good. If you, even though it looks very like an ABC book, but it really helps work. The more that you write into that book, the more you understand what's going on, and you can relate to it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
And then there's on Tom's website, a lot of information there for everyone to, you should look, if you haven't been there before, look into that. And right now, Tom is working on the National Nation. Can you talk about the Aphasia Nation?
Asian Nation. Yes. Not unlike any other groups that are, especially with Zoom online, but what we are trying to do, given the lack of understanding about aphasia in the world, and here in the United States, and even in the medical community, we are trying to make the public more aware about aphasia. And as I say here on the brochure, and if anybody's interested, Mark might have my brochure already, but otherwise you can send your emails to me and then I'll send them out to you too. You get to see more about what Aphasia Nation is doing, as I say, going beyond aphasia, because the foundation of all of this is plasticity. Plasticity is something, and all those principles is something how we all learn before our stroke. The same brand of plasticity. There you go. There's the brochure. The same brand of plasticity works whether you are learning something new or learning something for the second time after your stroke and aphasia. So plasticity really is the core of all of this. And there's a good metaphor there. Photosynthesis converts sunlight into green leaves. Plasticity converts thought, it might as well be sunlight, and cognitive activities into new brain matter. So something I never knew before. Like I say, I was just an engineer. I didn't know much about how the mind works or how the brain works until after. But with Aphasia Nation, and I have 6 action verbs here, and I'll read them easily enough. Educating the wider public, for sure, about all of these things. Teaching people with aphasia, teaching us too about how plasticity works and how the recovery processes work with plasticity. Sharing, this is a large component of what all of us do on a day-to-day basis, and realizing that it too is highly therapeutic. Sharing it, but then moving beyond that into other organizations, locally, regionally, state, nationally, internationally. So moving beyond, but sharing for sure, that's a big component of it, especially to the medical community who think they know everything. What they know is how the brain works, but they don't know how the brain works from our perspective. And they need to know more. They really do need to know more. Reaching beyond the speech language world. You might have seen a recent article about preaching to the choir. We do that a lot with each other. That helps us to be therapeutically worked. But we have to go beyond that and not just preach to us. We have to preach to those people who don't yet know how important it is to understand even a little bit about how the brain works. Because even learning a little bit, you get to learn a lot about how it works based on plasticity and how those principles work for learning. Building, the 5th verb, building an international educational organization to help rework the foundation of education and learning. Because if all those 5th graders actually did learn about photosynthesis, all of us, when we were 5th grade, right? That's how we learn. They should also know about plasticity in 5th grade because that's how the brain works. And we ought to know, again, even just a little bit. And then the last one is connecting with the healthcare community when they begin to realize that there really are gaps between what is otherwise a fairly siloed world for all of us doing all kinds of things, but even in the healthcare community, the different hospitals, different facilities are sort of walled off. They don't really know what to do once they just send people out the door, not realizing that would help a lot, because when you shove them out the door, and send home, a lot of people then don't take up what they need to do into rehab. It's too far away, no insurance, no transportation, no family to support with, all kinds of reasons why people need to get more information before discharging them. And that is true. You'll hear more about this with Aphasia Nation, but since March is here, I'm going to show you one more thing. A lot of people in Maine get this particular book, right? They send it out with everybody who leaves with a stroke. Unfortunately, there's no information in here about plasticity. It's all about stroke. There's one line in the glossary in the back that says, here's what aphasia is. However, when they discharge all these people, 30 to 40% of these people have aphasia with no understanding of what aphasia is. Nobody gave them information. You go home. Now it's up to you to take whatever's next for rehab, but you don't even know that word. How does it even connect with aphasia? I am working with them to add one more thing. It's this. I wrote this for this purpose last year during COVID. This needs to go with this now, and their family for the first time will go, oh, this is this thing called aphasia? This needs to go out to everybody who has it, because everything is in here for that very purpose. So yes, this is very important. And that's what the 6th action verb is, connecting with the healthcare community.
Yes, and I think that people that have a stroke, and people really don't understand about aphasia. I don't know if the doctors or the clinics think that there's a lot of people that have a stroke and they have problems speaking a little bit, but after a month or 2 months, everything's okay, and they don't even talk about aphasia. But people that are having problems with it for months and months and months, and then they finally have to look at the book, they should know the book earlier. It's
Right.
better to have it, and it's better to have it even if you don't need it. But if you need it, it's there, and I needed it. So,
Right.
but thank you. Thanks. I don't know if there was any.
It is
anything-
6 o'clock. We have Sheila saying Tom's totally on point about these sessions being therapeutic. Just everybody saying, and I want to add my, same thought about how, actually I have a whole new thought based on if I may try my hand at a poem, because I'd never really thought of the relationship between curiosity and progress. But seeing everybody here and people being curious to take up poetry, being curious to come and listen to all these, to come and listen to the interviews, seems to me also a really good anecdote for managing frustration. I wonder if anybody that if you're focusing on learning about yourself and learning about what you want to know more about, it can sort of buffer that you're not where you want to be just yet, but you're working toward it.
Very good point. Very good point.
I'm going to have to try and come up with a poem on curiosity that doesn't involve cats.
I was about to say something about cats.
All right. We're going to stop going live, and then just stay here. Just say goodbye, and thank you very much. Let me stop if I can find it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.